go a little further and address the issue of the fact that according to our friend here, this is his belief. Allah has, well, he wouldn't use the term body parts. I don't want to misrepresent him. Allah has a foot. He has a shin. He even has loins. And he has at least 2 eyes, if not more, and 2 right hands. Now, for the life of me, if Allah is the creator of the heavens and the earth, how does he exist as an embodied being without him dwelling in space? Because if he's atemporal and he's timeless, that means his God supposedly exists when there was no time, space, and place. But if you have a foot and you have a shin and you have 2 right hands, I don't know what happened to the left one, but we'll get into that. 2 right hands, at least 2 eyes. In fact, the Arabic says 3 or more, but we'll get into that. Then that means his God is an embodied being who is temporal and finite, which means that his God did not create all space or place and time, because there's a space that his body parts need to occupy in order for him to be his God. So the problem is actually worse for Daniel than for us. So he's going to have to explain, how is it that he's a polytheist, pagan, masquerading as a monotheist? Because what he just told you is not anchored in the Quran or the authentic Sunnah of Muhammad. So good luck in trying to defend your rational Salafi anthropomorphism. And last time I checked, his partner doesn't share his Salafi anthropomorphism. So we're going to have a field day. Now, how much time do I have?
1 minute to go. 1:10.
Hey, you want to take the last minute? Go ahead.
Yeah, so if you want to reply to what he was saying, right?
Yeah.
Before you do, I just want to make a point that even if we forgot everything he's saying, this doesn't prove polytheism. This proves anthropomorphism. You can have one God that's anthropomorphic, right? Someone could have like a Mujassim point of view of Allah, and that's not like polytheism. It doesn't make them someone that believes there's multiple gods, right? It's a non sequitur.
Yeah. So he's basically saying, okay, Allah has a hand and Allah has a foot. That means that, his hand must be in a space and his foot must be in a space. No, but that's not necessarily the case. Like, for example, these attributes, they subsist within the essence of God. The essence of God is outside of space, meaning outside of the universe, right? It doesn't necessarily mean now that God is finite, right? And he's saying, okay, God created space, or there's a space where God didn't create. Space itself is an abstract thing. It's not something like an essence. Space itself is relational. So there's 2 different types of views on space. There's one view that space is like this thing where it can be created and stuff like this. And then there's another view that space is relational. So like our view would be that God is above, creation. He's above his throne. Okay. And outside of creation, the only existence is God. So there wouldn't be any space. It's something called Makan Adam. So there wouldn't be no space. And God is above creation. So his whole thing of, his hand must be in a different place to this and that, it's nonsense. It doesn't even follow. Yeah, and it doesn't prove polytheism as well. I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, even if we got everything, and that's like the dumb thing, right? Even if we got everything he's saying, it's a non sequitur. It doesn't mean that we believe in multiple gods, right? It just means that we believe in a God that's anthropomorphic. He
presupposes that the attributes have their own essence. He always does this. It's like with his 99 gods argument. He's like presupposing that attributes have their essence by itself. No, the attributes subsist within the essence. They share the essence of God. It doesn't mean, with his same logic, like dumb logic, okay, well, since the persons of the Trinity subsist within the essence, according to the Catholic view, then the 3 persons are 3 gods. If you want to say, okay, well, the Father is distinct from the Son, right? They're not each other, but they're still, predicate, or even in his case, they actually do have the identity of God, right? We don't say the attributes have the identity, like in that sense, right? They're predication. So in his sense, well, then if he's going to make this type of critique, it bites him in the back, really, because then he becomes a polytheist by his own admission. He would have to believe in 3 gods.
Yeah, exactly. We don't believe Allah's attributes of his hands and his shin and his face and all these attributes. There are multiple distinct attributes that are of the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And I want to get into a previous video that we made on this particular issue. And maybe I can quote this book, right? So in the previous section of this book, page 38, this is Between the God of the Prophets and the God of the Philosophers, Reflections of an Athari on the Divine Attributes, right? By Hatim al-Hajj, page 38. What is the common degree or overlap of al-Qadr al-Mushtarak, which roughly translates to analogical predication, right? So we predicate things to God with some similarity, but that level of small similarity is all that we assign to Allah. Similar to how the Father begets the Son, the way that the Father begets the Son, it's made intelligible and made meaningful by us knowing the functionality of begetting in creation, right? But obviously the way that the Father begets the Son is nothing like the way of begetting of a father to the son in our created sense, right? So in the same way, al-qadr mushtarak, which is like roughly translated as like analogical predication, is the same way that we assign things to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we say he has a hand, there's some degree of similarity, but even that similarity itself is restricted to the mind. It's an ontological similarity. So this is like mentioned by Ibn Taymiyyah, as Hatam al-Hajj says here. To answer this, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah be pleased with him, argues that the common degree of similarity is only a conceptual notion in the mind, not an ontological reality. If we do not know what hearing is, we would never understand what Allah means by, so it's a bit hard to read, by calling himself Al-Samir, the all-hearing. The same applies to the other attributes. However, that commonality has no extra mental reality. So the ishtarak and participation is only in the mind, right? So what's being said here basically is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he's all hearing, or when he says he has a hand, or when he says he has existence, we know these meanings of these terms from creation, but the only level of degree of similarity we assign to Allah is that degree of similarity that we see within the context of what's being said. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he created Adam with his two hands. What does he mean by his two hands? Well, it's an attribute that he utilized to form Adam alayhi salam in the same way that we would form stuff that are created, right? The same thing, we would mold stuff or manipulate matter. In the same way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using an attribute similar to that, only on that level, conceptually in the mind. So I think that's enough for just explaining that. It's a very simplified sort of summary of our position when it comes to like assigning sort of descriptions to Allah. Yeah, we can't really get into that like in deep detail, but that's just like a basic outline. So it's a straw man. Like he's trying to make it seem like we have certain distinct qualities of Allah that are anthropomorphic, and that's not the case. Are we going to say that God is anthropomorphic now because we say that he exists and we exist, or that we hear and God hears? So when I say God has a hand and I say I have a hand, why are you making that arbitrary distinction of, hey, that doesn't sound right, it sounds anthropomorphic? Or hey, like, why can we say God has chin? Well, all these sort of predicates that we're assigning to God, we assign the same sort of quote unquote anthropomorphic qualities when we say God hears or God sees or God exists or any of sort of attributes that we assign to God, right? So the difference between us and you guys is that you guys are inconsistent. We're consistent. We say anything Allah describes of himself, we keep it consistent in that we don't liken him to creation, and we know the meaning within the context, and we say that there is intelligible meaning. With you guys make that arbitrary distinction